In this program, we see the weakness and gaps of the law of society, which is continued from the past. The law of society, that means the social law, is powerless and below people, so it cannot stop the people from their wrong ways. Because clay cannot carry the people unless it is an individual. It is enough to remember the property that was destroyed by people and the lives lost by many people in our age. We have seen that society goes above the law of humans. Even though the law clearly states that it is forbidden to kill a person and destroy property, we have seen the law enforcer joining the people without the responsibility. Because the people are like flowing water, the wall of law cannot stop it because the law of society is made of clay. Since the people are like a storm, the law does not prevent from sinking the individual boat on the sea. If an individual relies on the law of society, it will be like relying on a reed. Since the law of society is below the will of the people, if people gather and say that this thing is ours, it will be taken from the owner. The people come first, the judge follows. But the individual is always below the people and the law. This kind of supremacy of the people over the law is evident in poor and backward countries. In developed countries, at least, everything is below the law in their own country. You, my dear, are not only you well supported but also protected, so I will tell you about the justice of Namiohia, which is above all laws. There, the people and the individual are equal. There, I will show you the way in which group rights are equal to individual rights. Now let's continue.
It is said that the law of society is subject to culture and religion because culture and religion are people, and people's things are prioritized. According to Namiohia, everything is below the law. The reason why the owner of the universe himself is subject to the law is because the law is his word and his instructions. Since nothing is above the law in his eyes, the law will be applied until the earth is evenly divided. I am not saying that the law is not needed or should be changed or improved. That is not my intention. I am saying that it is not a wall to be relied on it, but that there are many good and effective laws. My intention in this section is to show the differences in judgment, results, and justice between universal laws. When I talk about social law, I am not talking about traditional or religious law, but about the common law that has authority and supremacy over all cultures and all religions. For example, it is clear that making loud noises in residential areas is prohibited because it causes noise pollution. It is stipulated in the community that you should keep your voice or music to yourself so that it does not disturb people who are sleeping or resting. If the loud noise from a religious institution disturbs and makes people uncomfortable, who will listen to the law and tell them to stop? Perhaps if the followers of the religion gathered and stoned him, who would be saved? At this time, the law is hidden under religion. According to the law of the community, the voice of many people is heard, and their path is right. When the people go out, the law must enter its sheath. Because every path has its destination, so that most of our country's people, as well as the people of Africa, have become poverty and misery. Today, according to the law of the community, the voice of many people is heard and their thoughts are right. So, is it desired? Where does one find the question? Among the international law that speaks of the dignity and equality of the girl child, there was a law when a girl child was stoned to death by the community and burned in the fire. In a situation where the creation of a girl child is not inferior to a man and the law, and her creation are not condemned to be a tool for men, the injustice and abuse against the girl child, especially in the Middle and Far East, is extremely serious. Therefore, community law is a toothless lion that does not treat all members of society equally, is incapable of saving them even if it does, and is also subject to the influence of culture and religion and our society. There are good and bad customs. My main purpose is not to distinguish between good and bad customs, but to show the case where the law is subordinate to the culture. Since a human being is born and remains under the shadow of his parents or guardians as well as his neighbors until he reaches the age of self-reliance or self-management, they are fully responsible for him. So, According to the customs and traditions of society, he subordinates his responsibility to the culture and leaves his 13-year-old daughter to marriage, who has not reached her maturity, with his neighbors, and the law that is set as a country is hidden. The older man says that it is not the law but the culture that supports him to marry a child, and he bravely defies the law. When he sees a child who has not yet reached puberty and is bleeding, he compares it to a heroic act on the battlefield and praises the culture, exacerbating its absurdity. At this time, if a wise person comes out and mentions the law of early marriage and accuses it of being wrong and that both the one who married and the one who had children should be punished, who will accept it? When the councils show that their culture is above the law is ashamed before them. The law is rejected, and its strength is weakened. Because the councils and law enforcers are also a part of the culture, their culture reigns above the law. When we see this in the animal world, no bull will touch the body of a heifer that has not yet reached puberty. He will not force her. He will not rape her.
We have seen and heard that the law of society is inferior to politics and authority, not only in the East and the West, but also here in our country, here in Africa. We have seen the inferiority of the law, where dangerous criminals are acquitted, innocent righteous people are condemned, the wicked are set free, and the good and hopeful are terrified. A politician is judged not by his crimes, but by his political benefits and harms. A politician is judged not by his actions, but by his political stance and views. The important thing is whether he benefits or not whether he destroys or not. The balance of the law is measured in the palm of the hand.
We have seen times when the law is always superior, when it is needed and useful, and when it is not needed, it is broken and breached. This is a manifestation of the evil era. There is another way to deal with injustice, says Namioya.in a unified universe, political partisanship and the destruction of authority. African countries are all led by righteous politicians, and the people of all African countries are in dire poverty and misery. As a result, the law of the community is not where they live, but where they govern. All community laws were good and necessary, but they are powerless. They are not saved. They are not superior because they are dependent. The world is looking for something new. Here is the Yodiper. There is another path that leads to destination between the ages, says Namiohia.
The law of society is said to be a judge, which means that it has a punishment. When this punishment is compared with universal justice, there is a wide difference between them, as far as the distance from heaven to earth. Most of the time, the judgment is not fair. Not fair means not appropriate or balanced. In society, the possibility of a punishment being too high or too low. In fact, often crime and punishment are completely unrelated. This means that the criminal is not punished or does not make him repent, or he is sentenced more than the crime, and he may be punished less than the crime. On the other hand, in society, there is no fair system where the harm done is repaired and what he has lost is not replaced. We see this with an example. Human law does not always give judgment by itself, nor does it extend justice, but it is dependent on people. The individual or the group can judge a legal or unjust judgment according to their own understanding or through prejudice or discrimination. The strange thing is that even if a legal judgment is passed, there are many cases where a legal judgment is not fair. For example, if a young boy in a village commits a crime and the judge sentenced him to 10 years in prison according to the law, justice will be denied. In the judicial system of a community, even one justice among thousands of judgments can be lost. Often, when the powerful distorts the balance of judgment, the judge stands on one foot and acts in a biased manner. The universal law says that the plaintiff should have come forward. Even if judges judge truthfully, justice and fairness differ widely. On the other hand, if a bully seizes the property of a minor and threatens him not to tell the law, and the minor closes his house and cries, then the strength of human law will be tested. Perhaps if the minor comes out and sues and the judge is biased, then the weakness of human law will be revealed. The brave youth, or even an adult, who does not leave a village, if he is imprisoned, his life becomes easy but not miserable. He lives as a leader of the prisoners, being respected. He does not get tired and does not get hurt. He eats the bread he did not grow and does not condemn his actions. He does not regret his actions because he has nothing in his life that he has lost or lacked because of his imprisonment. In view of the universal law of Namiohia, this person does not receive the punishment for his crime. Of course, it was a sentence, but not justice. Whether this person has served his sentence or is released from prison for any reason, there is a high chance that he will repeat his previous bad actions. Because even with the sentence passed and the time he has spent, let alone someone else, he cannot correct himself. According to Namiohia, justice means punishment for crime and humiliation. The world is looking for something new, that is justice.
If a man has had 2 oxen and a robber, thinking that one was enough to him, and killed one of them and ate it, and the robber was sentenced to imprisonment, it would certainly be good. The criminal should be imprisoned for the injustice he committed against freedom. At least it would prevent him from committing further and similar crimes. So, what about the farmer? His farm? His grain? What does he plow? What does he eat? What does he build his house? What are his children going to eat? Let me ask you, will the arrest of the robber help prevent the farmer from losing his farm? Even the death of the robber saved the farmer from losing his livelihood? Never. The farmer's livelihood were good with the ox, because the farmer's livelihood depended on the oxen, and one ox was the bread of the family and the food of the children. In this case, the weakness of the law of society is revealed. The weakness and emptiness of repairing damage and replacing what was lost or seen. Although the law of the community punishes the guilty, the victim also suffers from his crime. The law of the community does not have a system of healing and justice. I am not asking why the robber was imprisoned, but why the farmer was not repaired. I am not asking why the aggressor was not slaughtered, but why the farmer's ox was not replaced. The robber cannot return the ox because he slaughtered it and ate it, nor can he buy it and replace it because he is a robber and has no will or morality. So, what about the farmer? And his ox? What about his house? What about his children? What is better? The law of the community does not answer these questions. It is weak and does not rely on it. There is law and judgment, and there was no justice. So, where does justice come from? The farmer did not get justice because his ox was taken away because it was not returned to him and was not replaced. The farmer once had grain in his barn, but now he is missing from his plate. In the past, he would go out in the morning and come in at night, but now he sleeps during the day and repeats it all night. It would be good if the law of society had the responsibility of compensating the wronged and replacing the missed. It would be good if it had the function of supporting and restoring the oppressed and punishing the guilty. If this were, the law of society would not only be a judge, but also a protector. It would organize its power so that the wrong done today would not be repeated tomorrow, and it would pay a bidder in its judgment, so that it would suffer repeated losses. What would a criminal regret? This would have pondered the questions. If the law were not responsible, the farmer would start his life again from scratch and go back to the ground. What about his labor? His time? His age? Who pays for him? Who will compensate him? But in the universal law, there is no such injustice. This is me, German Herorde.